There once was a home in Willowbrook that glowed with laughter. It wasn't big, it wasn't grand, but for Sophia, it was everything. 5 years old, bright-eyed, and endlessly curious, she spent her days drawing suns with smiling faces, and her nights snuggled between the warmth of two people who adored her, Elena and Thomas, her parents. Elena would sing softly as she packed Sophia's lunch. Thomas would turn bedtime stories into miniature adventures, voices and all. They danced in the kitchen. They burned pancakes on Saturdays. They lived simply, but with a kind of joy that wrapped the house like a favorite blanket. Until one afternoon, that blanket was ripped away. It was just another school day. Sophia's drawing of a purple tree still hung crookedly on the class bulletin board. But that day, the school principal walked into her classroom, her face pale, her tone unusually serious. Sophia was led quietly to the office. There, by the yacht window stood Uncle Victor, Elena's older brother. He turned slowly when she entered, his hands buried deep in his pockets. "Sophia," he said, voice flat, eyes avoiding hers. "Your parents, they had an accident. They're gone. Gone." A word too big for a 5-year-old to hold. It fell on her like cold rain. She waited for him to say something else, to kneel down, to hold her, to say it would be okay. But Victor just stood there, unmoved, untouching, unreachable. That night, in the quietest house she had ever known, Sophia hugged a pillow on the couch while Victor muttered, "You'll have to be strong. Things have changed. We move on." Then he left, her alone in the living room, and shut the door to his bedroom. In the weeks that followed, Victor's detachment deepened. He wasn't violent. He was worse, indifferent. No bedtime stories, no pancakes, no music in the morning, only rules. If Sophia forgot to clean her shoes, he snapped. If she left toys on the floor, he shouted. He moved through the house like a shadow, with sharp edges. Sophia tried to hold on to the warmth of her memories, but they began to fade like chalk in the rain. Then came the visits from Isabel, Sophia's grandmother. The first time she stepped through the door, she froze. The house, once glowing with life, felt hollow. And Sophia looked smaller, quieter, thinner. "Are you eating well, sweetheart?" Isabel asked gently, holding Sophia's tiny, cold hands. "I'm fine, Grandma," she murmured. But she wasn't. Victor barely greeted Isabel, disappearing into his room whenever she came. He didn't like her questions. He didn't like her presence. And the more she visited, the colder he became. One afternoon, Isabel found Sophia eating dry bread alone in the kitchen. "Did your uncle not make dinner?" she asked, stunned. Sophia looked down. "He said he didn't have time." That night, back in her own home, Isabel sat in silence. She stared at the photograph of Elena smiling in a yellow dress. Something wasn't right. Victor wasn't just grieving. He was hiding. And Isabel, heart heavy, resolve quietly forming, and whispered into the night, "I don't know what he's done, but I know this. I can't let him raise her alone." At first, Victor's change in behavior caught Sophia off guard. Gone were the cold silences, the sharp commands, the dismissive looks. Instead, he began offering things she hadn't seen since her parents passed. Gifts, attention, even, strangely, smiles. "Would you like to go to the mall tomorrow?" he asked one evening, feigning casual interest. "We can buy you some new things." Sophia blinked, confused. For weeks he had barely spoken to her unless to scold. Now, suddenly, he wanted to take her. "Shopping?" She nodded slowly. Not out of excitement, but uncertainty. The next day, Victor brought home bags of toys, dresses, bright shoes with lights in the soles. He didn't ask what she liked. He just bought. Over the following days, he upped the performance. A visit. To the zoo, pizza night, a bracelet with her name engraved. "See," he said during one of their drives, "we can have fun together. I'm your family, Sophia. We don't need anyone else." But it didn't feel like love. It felt like rehearsed affection. It felt like strategy. At dinner, Victor began dropping lines that clung to the edges of Sophia's mind. Your grandma. She's getting older. I don't think she has the energy to keep up with you. Or, Isabel means well, but she doesn't know how to raise kids anymore. Times have changed. The words weren't shouted, just gently tucked into conversation, like poison in a spoonful of sugar. Sophia didn't respond. She was still trying to understand what game her uncle was playing, and why. Meanwhile, Isabel continued visiting, her concern growing with every stop. Sophia looked more dressed, better fed, but something was wrong in her eyes, a flatness that didn't belong in a child's face. Victor, oddly cordial now, welcomed Isabel with forced politeness. He began calling her Mom again, a title he hadn't used in years. He made coffee. He smiled at her in a way that sent chills down her spine. He was performing, for her, but Isabel had lived too long to be fooled by polished surfaces. She saw through it. And one quiet Sunday evening, she began filing for legal custody. Victor found out 2 days later. Sophia had been coloring in the living room when she heard the front door slam, followed by heavy, angry footsteps and a sound like paper tearing. Victor stormed into the kitchen, gripping a letter with the official seal of the county court. How dare she? He hissed, not realizing Sophia was listening. She thinks she can take what's mine? He crumpled the paper in his fist and vanished into his room. After that, his strategy changed. Victor didn't yell. He didn't lash out. He went quiet, calculating. Behind locked doors, he made phone calls. He met people Sophia didn't know. She would catch glimpses, documents spread out on the dining table, hushed voices behind closed doors, the sudden silence. When she entered the room, one night, as Sophia lay in bed, she heard the front door open and close. It was late. Curious and uneasy, she crept quietly out of her room, down the hallway to the top of the stairs. Voices, 2 of them, Victor's, low and tense. I need this to look real, he said. Sophia leaned in. If Isabel wins, I'm finished. She can't take Sophia. I need that insurance payout to clear, and if she gets custody, the whole thing falls apart. There was a pause, then. I've already planted enough doubt. I've made it look like she's unstable, old, alone. You just need to help with the papers. Something official, something that makes her look unfit. Sophia's heart slammed against her chest. Her fingers gripped the wooden rail. He wasn't trying to protect her. He wasn't even grieving her parents. He was using her. Tears welled in her eyes. But she didn't move. Not yet. Then came the final blow. Victor's voice, calm and venomous. No one's going to believe I'm the bad guy. I'm her uncle, for God's sake. Sophia pulled back, breath caught in her throat. That night, she didn't sleep. Her stuffed rabbit lay untouched beside her as she stared at the ceiling, eyes wide, thoughts spinning. All the sudden kindness, the new clothes, the sugary words. It was all an act. Her uncle never cared. Not about her, not about her parents. He only cared about control and money. By morning, Sophia felt as if she had aged years. She was only 5, but she carried a truth too heavy for even the strongest adult. At breakfast, Victor was back to his smile mask. Did you sleep well, kiddo? He asked, not looking at her as he sipped his coffee. Sophia nodded, keeping her expression still. She watched him stir his cup, smile faintly, scroll through his phone, and she made a decision. She would speak, even if her voice trembled. Even if no one believed her, she would tell the truth because no one else seemed willing to, and the courtroom would be the place to do it. The courthouse in Oakville sat beneath a sky the color of wet stone. Inside, the air was still, too still for a room about to decide a child's future. Sophia sat quietly beside Isabel, her small hand wrapped in her grandmother's warm grip. She wore a plain blue dress and held her favorite stuffed rabbit on her lap. Its fur was worn, but its presence gave her courage. On the opposite side of the courtroom, Victor sat tall, dressed in a tailored suit, every thread designed to say, competent and caring. He gave Sophia a small nod as she entered. the kind of smile you'd give to a stranger on an elevator. But Sophia didn't smile back. She saw him now, all of him. At the front, the judge took her seat, a woman in her 50s with a steady gaze, a calm voice, and no time for games. "We're here today to determine guardianship of the minor Sophia Elaine Rowe," she began. "Both parties may present their cases." Victor's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client has provided shelter, education, and financial support for his niece since the tragic death of her parents. He has ensured she is properly clothed, fed, and even enrolled in therapy to assist her emotional recovery. While Mrs. Isabel's concern is noted, she is of advanced age with limited financial resources and—" Isabel didn't blink. She simply reached for Sophia's hand and gave it the softest squeeze. Now it was Isabel's turn. She rose slowly, dressed modestly, but with a dignity that could silence any room. Her voice didn't tremble. "Your Honor, I may not have much money. I don't have lawyers or savings accounts, but I have something that no one else in this room can give Sophia. I have love. I have history. I held her the day she was born. I watched my daughter and her husband raise her with warmth and joy, and I will not let that love die with them." Victor leaned back in his seat, expression unreadable. His lawyer cleared his throat and rose again. "With all due respect, emotional sentiment does not guarantee a stable household. My client—" Then it happened. Sophia's small voice cut through the legal back and forth like a whisper in thunder. "Uncle is lying." The entire courtroom froze. The judge blinked. "Sophia, do you want to say something?" Victor turned, sharply. "Sweetheart, sit down. You don't understand." The judge raised a hand, silencing him with a single gesture. "Let her speak." Sophia stood slowly, her rabbit clutched tightly in one hand. Her voice was quiet but steady. "He doesn't care about me," she said, looking directly at the judge. "He never has. He's only being nice now because he wants the insurance. Money." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sophia continued, each word like a stone dropped into still water. "I heard him. On the phone. Late at night. He said if Grandma won, he'd lose the money. He said he had to make people think she was too old to take care of me." Victor stood up, his face flushed. "This is absurd. She's a confused little girl. Mr. Victor, sit down," the judge snapped. But Sophia didn't stop. He told someone he needed it to look real, that he'd already planted stories about Grandma being unstable. He said no one would believe he was the bad guy because he was my uncle. Tears ran freely down her face now, but she didn't look away. And he said my parents got in the way. He made the car break. On purpose. Silence. A kind of silence that even breath was afraid to disturb. The judge leaned forward. "Sophia, are you certain of what you heard?" Sophia nodded. He laughed. He said everything was settled, that he'd take care of me next. Victor erupted. "She's lying, she's just a child. This is a smear campaign." Two court officers stepped forward, positioning themselves near his bench. The judge's voice sliced through the chaos like a cold wind. "These are extremely serious accusations. I am ordering an immediate recess and requesting an emergency investigation into Mr. Victor's conduct and the circumstances of the parents' accident." She turned to Sophia with a different tone, softer but just as firm. "You were very brave today. Thank you." Victor sat back down slowly, his confidence shattered. Sophia turned to Isabel, who pulled her close without saying a word. Her small body trembled. Her voice had been heard. But the cost of courage was never light. The recess was brief, but the energy in the room had shifted completely. No one looked at Victor now with respect. They looked at him like a puzzle missing pieces. Pieces that now had names: insurance, manipulation, sabotage. When court resumed, the judge's tone was clipped and final. "In light of the testimony provided and the danger posed to the child, I am awarding temporary guardianship to Mrs. Isabel, effective immediately. Mr. Victor is to be placed under investigative hold while evidence is reviewed." Court officers approached Victor as he stood, seething. "This is unfair." he shouted. "I'm her family. You're believing a child over me?" But the judge didn't flinch. This court believes in truth, and today, truth came from the only person who never had a reason to lie. Victor was escorted out, still yelling. But no one looked back. Sophia sat beside Isabel, tears drying on her cheeks. "You were so brave," Isabel whispered. "I'm proud of you, my love." Sophia nodded slowly. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. The final hearing came quicker than anyone expected. In the weeks following Sophia's testimony, investigators moved swiftly. The brake tampering on her parents' car was confirmed. The life insurance documents showed clear signs of manipulation, including an attempted change of beneficiary dated just 3 days after the accident. Victor had denied everything, but the evidence spoke louder, and so did Sophia. That morning, the courthouse was full. Reporters, advocates, people who had heard whispers of the little girl who had stood up in court. Sophia sat beside Isabel, her hair neatly braided, the same stuffed rabbit resting quietly in her lap. Across the aisle, Victor was led in wearing handcuffs, flanked by 2 officers. He looked thinner, pale, and though he tried to maintain his usual arrogance, it flickered and faltered with every glance toward the judge entered. The courtroom fell into silence. "We are here to conclude the guardianship case of the minor Sophia Elaine Rowe, as well as review the criminal charges levied against Mr. Victor Rowe," she began, her voice steady, resolute. Victor's lawyer stood first. He tried one last time to soften his client's image. A man who made mistakes, overwhelmed by grief, perhaps misled by desperation. He argued that none of the evidence offered direct proof that Victor had caused the crash, but the courtroom was tired of stories. Then Isabel's lawyer spoke. He laid out the timeline: the crash, the phone call Sophia overheard, the forged insurance papers, the financial trail that pointed to motive. "Your Honor," he said firmly, "Victor Rowe saw his niece as a means to an end, not a child." And Sophia herself, with remarkable courage, brought that truth to light. The room turned to Sophia as she stood once more. She was smaller than the microphone, but taller than anyone in that room had ever seen her. "I don't want to stay with my uncle," she said clearly. "He never cared about me, he only cared about the money. And he knew my parents were going to die. He made it happen." Gasps again, even after all that had been heard. I heard him say it. I heard him laugh. About it. He said he didn't have to worry about them anymore, and he said I was a problem he had to get rid of too. There were no more words needed. Even Victor's lawyer looked away. The judge paused, then delivered the words that would change Sophia's life forever. "Mr. Victor Rowe, in light of the presented evidence, this court finds sufficient grounds for criminal prosecution related to the death of Elena and Thomas Rowe, as well as attempted fraud and endangerment of a minor. You are remanded to custody pending trial." Victor tried to stand, but the officers moved faster. He turned to Sophia as if to speak, but she didn't flinch. She looked at him, just looked, not with fear, not with hate, with quiet finality. "And as for guardianship," the judge continued, "this court grants permanent custody of Sophia Elaine Rowe to her maternal grandmother, Mrs. Isabel Perez." A soft gasp escaped Isabel's lips. She clutched Sophia's hand. They didn't cry, they just held each other, steady as stone. "It's over," Isabel whispered. "You're safe now." And this time, Sophia believed it. They returned home that evening to the modest house in Maplewood. But something had changed. It no longer felt temporary. It felt like home. Isabel had prepared a room for Sophia. Soft blue walls, shelves with books and stuffed animals, and a window that caught the morning sun just right. On the nightstand was a photo of Elena and Thomas smiling. "So you'll never forget how much they loved you," Isabel had said, gently brushing Sophia's hair. The days that followed were slow but healing. Isabel made pancakes on Saturdays, even if they were always a little burned. She packed Sophia's lunch with hand-drawn notes inside. They worked in the garden. They watched cartoons, cuddled under the same quilt Elena used to wrap around Sophia. And every night, just before sleep, Isabel would read from the same books Thomas once read, her voice steady, warm, and full of memory. Sometimes Sophia still woke crying. Sometimes she'd sit by the window in silence, gripping the rabbit so tightly its seams ached. But the difference now was that someone held her afterward. One afternoon, as they walked through a quiet park filled with falling leaves, Sophia turned to her grandmother. "Do you think they can see us?" she asked, her voice barely louder than the breeze. Isabel stopped, looked up at the sky. "I think they can," she said softly. "And I think they're proud of you, Sophia. So proud." Sophia nodded, blinking away tears. I miss them." "I do too," Isabel said, kneeling. "But we carry them with us now, every day, in the way we love, in the way we fight for what's right." Sophia didn't say anything for a while. Then, with a quiet, thoughtful voice, she said, "I want to help other kids someday. Kids like me, so they don't feel so alone." Isabel smiled. "You already are, sweetheart." And so the little girl who once sat silent on a courtroom bench became a voice for others. At her school, she helped lead a kindness project. At the community center, she told her story, softly at first, then with strength. People listened, and when they asked how someone so small had found the courage to speak up, she simply replied, "Because I had to, and because the people who love you never stop fighting for the truth." In a world where adults often hold the mic, it was a 5-year-old girl who spoke the loudest. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse with rage. She simply told the truth, and that was enough to shift the weight of justice. Sophia, once voiceless, in a house filled with silence, became the voice that exposed deception, broke a cycle of neglect, and restored love where it had been stripped away. She didn't do it alone. Behind her stood Isabel, a grandmother not armed with money or influence, but with relentless love. She didn't scream in court or throw insults. She simply showed up, again and again, refusing to abandon the child that life had tried to steal. Their story was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming something sacred, safety, truth, and the right to be believed, no matter how small. Your voice. Months after the final hearing, Sophia began speaking at her school's weekly assembly. She wasn't trying to be famous. She just wanted kids to know it was okay to speak up when something didn't feel right. And people listened. Even teachers confessed they had never seen a child so young speak with such grace and power. She didn't share every detail. She didn't need to. She talked about being scared but still talking, about having someone who believes you, about how even a kid can stop a lie, if they're brave enough to tell the truth. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, Isabel found a piece of paper folded under Sophia's pillow. It was a drawing. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house with a big sun overhead. One was labeled Grandma, the second me, and the third Mom and Dad in the sky. Below it, Sophia had written, "We're together now, and safe." Isabel didn't say anything. She just held the drawing to her chest, closed her eyes, and let the tears fall quietly. Not out of grief, but out of peace. Let this story remind us all that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers from the corner of a courtroom. Sometimes it speaks in trembling words that break open lies. And sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. So if you've ever felt unheard, if you've ever been told you're too young, too old, too small to matter, remember Sophia. She wasn't born powerful. She simply refused to stay silent, and that made her the strongest voice in the room. If this story moved you, share it. Because somewhere out there, another Sophia is waiting to be heard. Subscribe to hear more stories of truth, courage, and the people who dare to stand up. And don't miss what happens next, because some truths take more than one voice to set free. Part 2. Coming soon. Stay tuned.